afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Minnesota Women in Conservation, where together we are nurturing land and community. I'm Burke Murphy, the state coordinator for MNWiC, and this is an initiative. This is an initiative that has been sponsored by Renewing the Countryside. And for some reason, okay, let's see what's happening here. My slideshow is not moving. Stopped. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened. All right, let's get this back in gear. Just 1 second. Okay, let's see if this works. I want to introduce Renewing the Countryside to you briefly. We have been supporting and connecting stewards of land and farms with necessary resources for over 20 years. Our landscape involves working lands and conservation, local food systems, and supporting vibrant communities. These are just some of the programs that RTC sponsors and leads, from Urban Ag to Go Farm Connect and Farm to School and Early Childcare. We are committed to creating vital rural communities and urban. So why does MNWiC matter? Well, across the state of Minnesota, women producers are managing over 9 million acres of farmland. And as recent as the 2022 Ag Census, female farmers are listing their primary occupation in farming. Over 35,623 women in farming in Minnesota alone, and over 19,000 women are identified as non-operating landowners. Female farmers are involved in every type of farming, from grains and oilseed and cattle and dairy to veggies, fruits and nuts, and sheep and goats, and flowers and pigment producers. Our goal with Minnesota Women in Conservation is to welcome all women in agriculture and land stewardship, to increase women's knowledge and understanding of and use of conservation practices and natural resource conservation service programs. We are shepherding women through the process of program assistance, and we believe building a lasting legacy of relationships and regional networks. Our team consists of myself, Chris Marion, communication specialist, Kara Komodo, data management, Rebecca Christoffel, evaluation specialist, the whole RCT team that supports us, and I'd like to briefly introduce the 4 Tri-County regional coordinators. We have Allison Ryan, who actually couldn't be with us today because she's distributing food, serving the Northeast, North Central region of Aiken, Itasca, and surrounding counties. Alex Kaminsky, who is with us today from the West Central Upper Minnesota Valley region, serving Lackaparle, Chippewa, and Swift counties. You see here I'm identifying the farms, the female producers, and the amount of farmland in acreage. Noreen Thomas is with us today from the Northwest region, serving Clay, Norman, and Wilkin counties. And Maddie Barch is with us, serving the Southeast region of counties Goodhue, Rice, and Dakota. You'll note that the Southeast counties have the highest concentration of farms and female producers, however, smaller acreage. So our goal is to equip women to implement conservation practices, and our outreach includes potlucks, webinars, learning circles, and field days. Our participant classification encompasses conservation and ag support people and landowners, with, we hope, a growing pie of beginning farmers. This map reflects the amount of contact that we've made engaging women across the state, and we're hoping with your help and enthusiasm, we will turn the state dark green. Here's a few examples of a potluck last fall in West Central Minnesota, focused on planting native seeds and habitat restoration, with almost 40 women joining, and a learning circle in December in Northeast with 32 women attending. The response has been heartwarming and awesome. I love this organization and tonight's group. I love how diverse the groups and individuals are in their experience. This kind of momentum and enthusiasm has been incredibly gratifying. And just this past Sunday, we had our field hike at Hay Creek Hills Farm, led by land steward Wendy Johnson. That was our Southeast Minnesota field hike. And we got to see and hear about 3 NRCS programs, conservation programs she's implementing. And coming up on August 10th will be the Northeast Summer Field Day, where they are going to focus on foraging, exploring, and conserving at a farm in Aiken. So please join us for these Welcoming Wednesday webinars, always on the 4th Wednesday of the month. And next month in August, we're going to be featuring Indigenous foraging and conservation practices. Now I'd like to welcome our speakers. We are so grateful that they're both with us today, Courtney Tchida and Hannah Bernhardt. I want to take a moment to share their bios. So Courtney Tchida brings over 20 years of experience as an organic farmer, a community organizer, an educator, researcher, and collaborator to her work at Wild Farm Alliance. She played a pivotal role in founding and managing the Cornercopia Student Organic Farm at the University of Minnesota, and she co-created the Minnesota Seed Project to help connect people to free, locally adapted native seeds. Throughout her career, Courtney has been dedicated to imparting knowledge about farming and environmental stewardship to the next generation. At Wild Farm Alliance, she is connecting farmers in the Midwest to resources and information on how to make farms more friendly to wildlife. She's an alum of the University of Minnesota with degrees in environmental horticulture and agricultural education. Thank you, Courtney. And Hannah Bernhardt, it raises and direct markets grass-fed beef and lamb and pastured pork at Medicine Creek Farm in Northeast Minnesota. She also educates the public about regenerative agriculture and soil health through agritourism, public presentations, and policy advocacy. Hannah is the Pine County Farmers Union president, a land stewardship project board member, and an active member of Climate Land Leaders and the Sustainable Farming Association. It's a remarkable story from both of these women. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing so that you can share, Courtney, and take it away. Remember, we're going to take questions at the end. Noreen Thomas is here to help facilitate that between 12:45 and 12:50. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much. Let me just get my screen share going here. Okay. I'm excited to be here and to be talking about beneficial birds and conservation with Hannah too. I got to visit her farm earlier in June, and I'm excited for her to share her story in amongst all this too with beneficial birds. There's Hannah. These are the pictures that we took when we were up at her farm. Hannah, do you want to do any other intro at this point? Are you good?
Well, yeah, I can just share
Go for it.
that I grew up on a corn and soybean farm in southern Minnesota, but I have been farming for just about 10 years here on a much different landscape. And we started with zero infrastructure. So we've used many conservation programs to get started, and Wild Farm Alliance is just one of them.
Awesome, great. And just to give you a little overview of what we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit about Wild Farm Alliance and what we do. We're going to talk about pest control services of birds, what birds need, supporting birds with nest boxes and native habitat, and then we can hopefully have some time for some questions and discussions at the end. So Wild Farm Alliance is a national nonprofit, and our mission is to promote healthy, viable agriculture that protects and restores wild nature. We developed a 2050 vision statement that outlines our work with some ambitious goals, and our 3 programs are the Farmland Flyways, the Farmland Wildways, and the Farmland Waterways. And the long-term goals of these 2 programs include to inspire 10% of US farms to be part of the Farmland Flyway Trail, having an average of 5 nest boxes or perches on their farms. We want to inspire 25% of the US farms to plant a Farmland Wildway, having an average of a mile of habitat, which would lead to about 500,000 miles of living field borders. And this number relates to the number of miles of hedgerows that were historically found in Great Britain. And so we have a much larger footprint here. And so we think that's a very reachable goal. And then lastly, we want to inspire 10% of river frontage on farms to be planted as farmland waterways, which would lead to 100,000 miles of ravine habitat as well. And so thinking about, why we should support beneficial birds on farms, songbirds like these swallows are very beneficial. And in fact, overwhelmingly, the majority of birds are beneficial at least some of the time. Of course, there are a few bird species that can cause a lot of damage, from eating seedlings or greens to ripe seeds, nuts, and fruit, but most of the time they are beneficial. And if you've ever seen or experienced watching a parent bird feeding its young like this, bluebird, you know how delightful it is. It reconfirms the power of nature. It lets us get outside ourselves. It gives us a glimpse into the wonders and magic of a functioning ecosystem. Without birds, our crops and wildlands would suffer immensely, as would our own mental health. Whenever I'm out in a field, I feel really honored to be able to just see such an intimate act that these birds undertake every 10 minutes or so all day long. For a couple of weeks as they feed their voracious young. And so that's a really fun thing. Supporting beneficial birds for pest control is not a new or radical idea. Many cultures and indigenous land stewards practice these methods. And even the USDA was touting the benefits of birds for farms more than 144 years ago. The Division of Economic Ornithology was founded in 1885, and much of their early work was focused on studying the positive effects of birds in controlling agricultural pests and defining the geographic distribution of animals and plants throughout the country. The division was eventually expanded and it was renamed the Bureau of Biological Survey, and that's the origin of the wildlife part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service today. And so while the focus on birds at the federal level has become less and less over the last decades, there has been a resurgence in interest in research of the effects of birds in agriculture. Back in 2018, Wild Farm Alliance published this resource where we outline more recent research on the role birds play in agricultural settings, and it covers research from across North America on various crops and how birds and what kinds of birds provide pest control services. The appendix of this booklet has 120 studies, and 90% of them show that birds are beneficial in terms of reducing pests, and only 3% the opposite. And this research covers songbirds in vegetables, fruits, nuts, grasslands, pastures, field crops, and even raptors consuming rodents and pest birds. 30% of the research in this booklet shows that birds decrease damage or increase growth and or yield. There are a lot of studies that show that birds cause crop damage, but only 5% of the research showed that the birds actually ate the crop itself. And then 3% of the studies showed that the birds killed beneficial insects enough to constrain pest control and were so problematic. So it's a teeny tiny amount of, birds that are out there that are actually not beneficial. This is a really great study where they were looking at field edge habitat near kale, and researchers found that hedgerows attracted birds that provided important pest control. So more cabbage looper caterpillars were consumed by birds near shrubby field margins than near other uncultivated areas. In apple orchards, various studies reported that between 13 and 99% of overwintering codling moths were killed by birds, especially near habitat. So having that habitat is really, really important. This is a study where, nest boxes were used to increase the density of great tits, which are a relative of chickadees, and the apple yield was able to increase by 66%. In Michigan's cherry growing region, pest birds were significantly fewer in orchards with American kestrel boxes, while the kestrel nestlings typically only fed on 2% birds of their diet. The presence discouraged the pest birds in the orchard. And so for every dollar spent on nest boxes, between $84 and $357 of sweet cherries that were saved from pest birds. And that reduction across the states was an estimated result in $2.2 million to $2.4 million over 5 years. So that's huge. So what do birds need to be successfully on farms? Well, they pretty much need the same kind of needs that humans have. They need a place to sleep, they need food resources, they need hangout space with cover, they need bathrooms. So how can farms offer these spaces? How far a bird flies and the available food and nesting resources factor into the wider landscape influences, as does a bird's size and metabolic rate. So smaller birds have much shorter flight ranges. For example, like titmice and chickadees, they primarily forage and nest in well-defined territories, moving only a couple hundred feet in any one direction. Whereas like a red-tailed hawk is going to typically forage and breed in ranges up to 2 miles. So this makes sense when you consider that a chickadee has to be close to its nest, since it's going to be bringing insects back and forth 150 times a day, versus a red-tailed hawk, can fly further and only needs to bring 4 to 8 rodents back per day. Let me see if I can do that. Too much. 1 second. For some reason, my printer just decided to turn on. Not sure why. Anyway, sorry about that. It's essential for parents to have cover near the nests for roosting, loafing, and watching over their young. Cover will also help protect the fledglings from predation until they learn to move stealthily through their new environment. And it will also buffer wind, rain, snow, and sunlight. Birds also need, water to drink, but they also needed to keep their feathers cleaned. Well-maintained feathers insulate them from the cold, whether it's a pond, a creek, a wetland, or a stream. Even if the water is just intentionally dripping from an irrigation system, having water around increases the chances of birds nesting on the farm and providing pest control benefits. And the first simple step that you can take is to put a nest box on your farm. There's really no risk involved in putting up a nest box. In fact, putting it up is just, results in all kinds of great benefits, like birds eating pests. And here's where I wanted to jump in and have Hannah talk about her experience putting up nest boxes. These are all pictures. Well, the middle one isn't from her farm, but the other 4 are that we took this spring. So Hannah, take it away.
Yeah, so at this point I can't even quite remember how I became familiar with Wild Farm Alliance, but I know that I listened to a webinar early on and found the instructions about how to install nest boxes and why. I think my first interest in beneficial birds was at a marble seed conference where I heard someone talking about having predator problems, hawk problems with their chickens, and that the solution they had found was installing a kestrel nest box, because once a kestrel moved into that territory, the hawks moved out. And that was just such a clever solution that I had never heard of before. And I do have pasture chickens. I do intensive rotational grazing of my cows and sheep. And so I move my cows every day and my sheep every other day. So there's a lot of fencing. I also got 2 NRCS contracts to put up fences and water lines throughout my pastures. And once I got the fence posts up, I also happened upon all of these bluebird nesting boxes at a garage sale. And I think there were 5 of them. And so I remembered this Wild Farm Alliance webinar, and I was excited, and I decided to just give it a try and put them up. And it was so much fun to see what was attracted. And then I learned more about how actually beneficial they are for my own livestock. And so for cattle, flies are one of the main parasites that bug them. And when you're raising grass-fed beef, I don't know the exact statistics, but I've heard that basically, every moment the cow is standing swatting flies means they're not eating. They're distracted from eating. And so you're gonna have less gains in your cattle if you have more flies. And rotational grazing already kind of helps break up the fly life cycle because you're kind of moving away from where the flies are hatching. But with cattle especially, you're going to have flies. And so at some point I heard I think on one of these webinars that a tree swallow can eat like 1,000 flies a day. And so I was immediately like, okay, I got to get more of these nesting boxes. Now have all of these fence posts, and it didn't take much to install them. And so my sister is a high school teacher, and we were just kind of talking about what some of the projects her kids were working on. And we started talking about how maybe they could make nesting boxes for me in the wood shop class. And so I actually like did this awesome project where like I purchased the materials, and then the kids went through this process where they had to act like they were like officially contracting with me, and like what it would be like to be a professional. And so, they kind of like presented to me their plan, and then they went and built 35 nest boxes for me. And so someone else did all that hard work for me, but they got a great learning experience out of it. And then I got to systematically install them through all of my pastures. And the Wild Farm Alliance, also provides all the guidelines of like how far apart you want to put them, and the height, and how to also kind of deter predators that might go after the birds. But it was amazing to see just how many tree swallows and bluebirds were suddenly filling my pastures. And also now when I move my cattle every day to a new paddock, it's super cool to see all of the tree swallows swoop in over their backs as they kind of move into the new grass. The flies kind of all lift up off their backs, and suddenly the tree swallows are all swooping in, eating up those flies. So it has helped immensely with fly pressure. It's also just like it aligns with my values to be providing habitat and to just be working with nature like in the way that I feel that nature kind of wants to take care of these problems. I don't use any topical fly sprays or pesticides. And so that's like one major benefit for me is that I'm able to get this without having to use a chemical that I know is bad for my soil health and the microbes in my soil. I'm still able to do something that I know is good for my cattle and is also helping with those weight gains. And there was one final thing. Oh yeah, so before I had these nest boxes, I did try like several other methods of reducing fly pressure, and like one of them was putting like sticky fly traps around a plastic barrel, and I would move that to every time I moved the water tank, I would kind of like put it there next to the water tank. And that was just, it worked, but it was just really gross. and also like the sticky fly traps would get so covered so fast that I was basically just like blowing through the fly paper. And that stuff's actually really expensive. And so this was like a one-time investment in the materials, which really wasn't that much. And then I'm getting, a return on that investment every year without any really much labor on my part, other than just like the enjoyable part of like getting to see who's moved in and watch them feed their babies. So that's kind of been my story. And now I love to tell other people about it because it just seems like such a natural solution.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that story. It was so much fun to come visit the farm and see all of the tree swallows and the bluebirds and eggs and all of that happening. Yeah, awesome. And one of the resources that Hannah was talking about is actually this beneficial bird chart that talks about, what songbirds eat what and where they nest in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So this it outlines the different species that all use the same box as the eastern bluebird. So there are chickadees, there are nuthatches, there are swallows, tufted titmice, wrens, and the prothronotary warbler. That one's kind of more down in the driftless area of the state. But these are all different, birds that are going to use that same nest box. They eat so many different pests. It's amazing. That was one of my first projects when I started working with Wild Farm Alliance, was like looking up what all these different birds eat and all the pests that they eat. And there's so many. It's really amazing. But there's all the information that you need to know is on this chart. There's also on the back side of this chart, there's more information about other types of beneficial birds that also eat more pests, that use either different nest boxes or like barn swallows, or where they actually nest up in the eaves and things like that. And it's just important when you're thinking about installing that nest box that you want to put it and create that safe environment for birds. So you want to place them outside of where cats can access them. You want to put them away from noisy generators or pumps, and away from anywhere where pesticides are being used to avoid exposure to the eggs, the nesting material, the food, and the birds themselves. And so here's that nesting structure booklet publication. We're going to put that in the chat, the link to that, or you can scan that QR code. But there's a lot of great information in that publication that you can find if you're interested in putting up nest boxes. And then installing native habitat is also important for beneficial birds. And we created this beneficial bird native plant chart, which has about 170 different species that are outlined in that. We talked about, is it deciduous? Is it evergreen? When is it flowering and providing food? How much food is it providing? Is it, providing lots of caterpillars or just a few caterpillars? All kinds of great information in that. And then a lot of times, paying for installing habitat or conservation plantings to support beneficial birds can be a barrier for growers. And there are many different NRCS conservation practices that are eligible for EQIP or the Conservation Stewardship Program that farmers can use to install habitat that will attract beneficial birds. So, alley cropping, conservation cover, field borders, riparian buffers, tree and shrub establishment, even the structures themselves, putting up nest boxes or perches, are all different practices that can help provide funding for you to implement them on your farm.
Yeah, and can I say too that I did just sign a conservation stewardship program contract last year, and I'm in the beginning stages of that contract. And you kind of get to choose enhancements that will help your habitat improve. And so one thing I'm doing is a pollinator planting, but another thing is a fruit-bearing tree and shrub planting. And part of the idea of that is to provide more food for wildlife, birds, and increase that food-bearing habitat as well. And so that won't happen until year 2, I think. But I actually I don't think I had seen that chart, so I'm going to use that now when I pick my trees.
Awesome. Yes, please use it. It's a great resource. And if you want to know more, we have a whole 10 webinar series coming up this fall that's starting in September that will be all about the role of birds on Midwest farms. And these lessons will be led by researchers and conservationists outlining different research and practices for better supporting and attracting beneficial birds and managing pest birds on the farm. And this is like live as of, I think, yesterday. So you can register for these. This is hot off the presses. Kind of brand new news from us, and we're excited to share it with all of you. And then just kind of wrapping up, and then we can take some questions, but there are kind of, 3 easy ways to get started. Obviously, installing songbird nest boxes is an easy step you can take. And if you do, please join our Farmland Flyway Trail. This is the map, and I'm super proud of that big blue cluster of all those dots in the Midwest, and I want even more. People to add their farms to the map so that we can, really get to that huge goal that we have of having 1 million structures all across the United States. Secondly, if you want to, even baby your step is just to take a walk and sort of inventory the plants and birds that are on your farm. There are apps like Merlin and iNaturalist that make that really, really easy. Merlin, you just like push a button and it'll record the birds and tell you what it hears. iNaturalist, you can like take the picture of the different plants or birds. You can take pictures of birds with Merlin too and upload them. But iNaturalist works for like any living organism. So and even animal poop. It's crazy how effective it is at identifying all the different natural world around us. And then lastly, connecting with organizations like Wild Farm Alliance, MNWiC, and NRCS to help you, plan, design, and pay for those habitat implementation is really crucial. And now I think we're ready if there are any questions out there.
Well, thank you very much, Courtney. While Noreen might be screening for questions, I want to just ask everybody to turn their photo on, their video on, so that we can take a group photo. And so, Courtney, if you stopped sharing your slides, and then I will see if we can get everybody. Yeah, so Maddie, we just need to move us out of being featured so that everybody can be seen. You can do that.
Oh, I have it so that everybody can be seen.
You do? Okay, I just don't see
Yeah, and
that.
I can take the picture.
Okay, please do, because I'm not seeing that.
Okay. Alex, are you there?
Alex, flashing lights.
Is
Okay.
Okay, on the count of three, everybody. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then I'll do one more for safety. You know how these things go. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Maddie. Thanks, great. Noreen, how is it? How are we doing with questions?
Well, good. We have one, Courtney, too. What was the link for the new webinar series that you're going to be rolling out? Can you share that or drop it in the chat for everyone?
Yes, I can do that. It's there. So wildfarmalliance.org/Midwest-bird-course.
Okay. Okay.
There was a question too for Hannah. You placed nest boxes for tree swallows, even though you have trees on your farm. Could you kind of cover that, versus a natural habitat versus boxes?
Yeah, I mean, I do have trees, but I don't have many trees throughout my pastures. I actually converted this land, it was hayfields, and so most of the tree cover had been cleared before I purchased it. And so putting those nesting boxes right there in the pasture meant attracting the birds to where I really wanted them to be. So yeah, and I'm sure I had tree swallows, but I wasn't seeing them until I put up the nest boxes.
And tree swallows are cavity nesters, so they need to have like a dead tree that has a hollowed out place for them to nest into. So those nest boxes are like mimicking the dead tree that they would normally, nest in and providing that. So yeah.
Here's another question. How far should nest boxes be from the area that you're using pesticides?
That's an excellent question. You'd want them to be, I would say, pesticides can drift. So there's that question. I don't know that there's a specific, like, exact distance. Boy, Shelly, feel free to like jump in. I know Shelly's on this call too. But yeah.
I think too with the inversion on some of the chemicals that we're seeing can drift quite a ways actually, and especially if you know that you're going to do aerial application, I mean, you're putting it right on a possible bird flying. So I just, personally, I've seen a lot of, oh, it's kind of scary because those aerial spraying, when they're spraying a field, they come in quick. I don't know if a bird would have time, honestly, to move when they come in with aerial spraying. So I would think real hard and not to have it anywhere it can drift, anywhere where there's aerial spraying, anywhere that there's the possibility of that, especially with the young. And a question too, what's the difference between a structure of a nesting box to a commercial birdhouse?
They're the same thing. Yeah, they don't necessarily have like a nest box. A commercial nest box that you buy is going to be very similar to the bluebird boxes that we recommend. A structure could also be a perch. So there's like what structures for all the bat boxes are also in that same category as our barn owl boxes. We don't really have barn owls too much in the Midwest, but those are all in that structures that fall under that broader category.
And Alex has a question has trouble with on her farm, some mosquitoes. So what would be the most effective for mosquitoes for her?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend, getting a nest box up there, because there are definitely birds that will eat those mosquitoes. I'm just looking here really quick. The tree swallows, they also eat mosquitoes. So there you go. Tree swallows also like to have a little bit of water nearby. So you want to make sure that if you just put up the nest box and there's no water nearby, you may not attract tree swallows, but tree swallows are very common all over the states. And so they would do well there. Eastern phoebes also, they utilize, nest shelves and building eaves for their nests, and they will also eat mosquitoes. So, having that, there's actually a really cool, the up in Ontario, they have like a mandate that if you destroy barn swallow habitat, you have to put up, you have to create more habitat for those barn swallows because they're endangered. And they have these plans online that are, I'll see if I can quick find the link, but they have this cool structure where it's just like a little eave that you put out in your field that will attract the barn swallows and the other birds that need those, that eave to be underneath.
What about bats? Hannah, do you have bats on your farm?
I don't, not that I've seen. I mean, maybe they are here somewhere, but I don't have any old buildings here. Like this was raw land, and so we built everything new, and it feels a little bit like, there's no like old barn for them to be in or attic or anything.
Courtney, bats versus birds for mosquitoes and just the intersection of bats to the other birds. Can you kind of talk about that?
Sure. I mean, yes, bats are going to eat mosquitoes right now. We have lots of issues with bats right now in Minnesota because of the white nose fungus that's kind of taken them out. So, any ways in which we can support bats is really important. I know at Wendy's farm, what we were just at this weekend, she was talking about how she has like bat hiberniculums, that like the caves that the bats overwinter in that are nearby, and that she can't do any practices that would affect any of the trees between, it was something like April and October, because the bats might be out roosting in those trees. But I don't know that there's like a competition between bats and birds in terms of insects. There's enough insects for everybody. And yeah, so creating more habitat that's going to host more insects is always a good thing for both bats and for birds.
Is there also anything they can do for eagles that are eyeing your chickens?
That's a great question. I used to have hawks attack my chickens. And I don't know that there's a ton of things, you could always try to put up one of the like fake owls to try to deter those, but other than that, I'm not quite sure what else to really try there. And I think the kestrels might be a good option too, like putting up a kestrel box, or that might help deter, you know, creating a territory for kestrels would maybe keep the eagles away too.
Is there a desired height for a bluebird box?
Yeah, I think it's between about 5 and 10 feet off the ground.
Okay. Do you have to clean out the box every year or every month, or can you guys?
Yeah, we recommend doing that at least once a year in the fall, just so that it kind of, you know, cleans it out. A lot of times there are different birds build different types of nests. Like house wrens, they will like fill up the box with twigs and make it pretty inhospitable to the next, you know, round of birds coming in. So you want to make sure that you clean it out in the fall. Yes.
Anything to use like
Yeah, I would recommend using like gloves and a mask, because it can get really dusty and kind of not so nice for you. You know, you could, you know, put a little bleach spray in there. But just, you know, just basically clearing out all the debris is really what your goal is.
Okay. And anything like if is there such a thing as bird lice that it can be residual, or
There are some different pests that can overwinter in the nest box in the nest, so that you definitely want to get rid of those insects. And oftentimes you'll see like little like the spider nest kind of clumps of different insects that are in there. So I would just clean all that out.
and how about oregano, you know, for bird pests, you know, like lice or things like that?
I don't know specifically about that, but I can't imagine that it would hurt if you tried it. So go for it.
We have a statement too. Julie added that black-capped chickadees need to collect about 350 to 570 caterpillars per day. And I wonder,
Wow.
and to feed their nest. So I wonder if that works for, we're having problems with army worms. So does anyone know anything about that? If that would be the same? I hope so, you know.
Yeah, I would think so too. Yeah, and there's a Doug Talmy quote about one nest full of Carolina chickadees eat about 6,000 caterpillars in for that one brood, just to get them from hatched to fledge. So it's a lot. Yeah.
Wow.
And the army worms, I'm just looking here. There are definitely birds that'll eat the army worms.
While
Yeah,
you're looking that up, and Noreen, did you see Chelsea said that if a group of volunteers want to build some nest boxes, does WFA or any other org accept donations?
Yes, I would love to accept some donations of nest boxes, because I have a list of farmers who want nest boxes that I can share them with. So
Fantastic.
we got a grant from Blooming Prairie last year and built about 120-ish nest boxes, and have distributed all of those at this point. So we're looking to build more and to share more. So yeah, that would be great. Please follow
Yeah.
up with.
And I can plug too, like time is what farmers usually don't have. So we want to do all these cool conservation things, but you know, the biggest difference between buying a commercial bird box and building one is just the cost. It's like you're paying so much more for the labor it took to build it. And so you know, that's why having volunteers build ours was so important. The materials we could cover, but finding the time to build them all, that's what we didn't have.
and just a plug, Hannah's going to be on a video coming out this fall for experience with supporting tree swallows on her farm. So sometimes, you know, we need to see it before you can build it. So there you are. Hannah, you want to talk about that? Like, how many tree swallows does this mean that you've been able to kind of cultivate? And, you know, how do they have their babies there? Do they stay there? We want to hear all about this.
Well, yeah, this video was, you know, Wild Farm Alliance came out and took those photos and videos of me kind of talking about my experience with them. And I mean, one of the most fun things is like seeing those little babies poking their heads out of the holes when you drive by. And you know, I drive by in my side by side, and like I always slow down before I get to the box because usually somebody flies away as you drive by. Um, uh, and that part's really fun. Just, knowing that I'm feeding more than even just people or even just my livestock. It's like, it's so wonderful to know that it's a whole, healthy, thriving ecosystem for everybody to eat here.
Do you have an idea of how many you've added and what is that impact? Is it like 10 nesting boxes? Is it 5? Give us kind of an idea of your, how many acres and how many nesting boxes. So the
Sure.
possibility.
Yeah. So I have a 160-acre farm, so that's a square quarter section, and I've put up 35 boxes. And so I don't know, Courtney probably knows the distances they're supposed to be. And we definitely took that into consideration when we were putting them up, but we kind of also just like placed them spread out where it felt like we needed them, where like, yes, there was less trees, or facing the like open pastures where it seemed like there probably wasn't any natural habitat for tree swallows there. And we have seen other birds in the boxes too. I think, wasn't there one nest, Courtney, where like cowbirds had had
Yeah, we
put some
definitely saw
eggs
some
in?
cowbirds, and sadly, like the house sparrows too.
Yeah.
They're an invasive. They sometimes will inhabit the same nest boxes, and there's
Yeah.
different tricks for trying to discourage them. But yeah,
There was the idea too of having local Boy Scout troops maybe to build these. And our egg instructor here that just got hired in a little town north of us is probably going to reach out to you, Courtney, because he's all about this. Because he's, teaching shop and doing all that. So maybe all of us collectively can figure out in a year, like how much more boxes did we add to the landscape to help Courtney out and the good example. So this totally.
We had an event with Farm Buds where we built about 18 different nest boxes in the evening at the Minnesota Tool Library. And that was super fun. So yeah, it's a fun event and it's super, anybody can do it really. It doesn't take like super high carpentry skills. And yeah, it's great. And we put those nest boxes at Urban Ventures farm. They have 2 different farm locations, one in Minneapolis and then one I think out in like Prior Lake. And so, or Lakeville, one of the 2, but yeah.
There was also a note from Shelley that the spring that you checked many of the boxes and most of them had occupants, residents in them with either babies or eggs. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was so fun to like see lots of eggs at Hannah's farm when we were there. We actually came back a couple weeks later and checked for some more because we thought maybe they would be, they'd have nestlings that the parents were feeding, and we did find a couple of those boxes that did. And we're trying to get video of that so that we can share in our resources and just increase more excitement about it. But yeah, lots of bluebird eggs, tree swallow eggs that were on Hannah's farm. There's another farm that I've been checking that has house run eggs and babies. And yeah, it's really, really fun. I have a little different assortment of tools that I bring with me. I have like the little screwdriver to take out the pin to be able to open up the nest box, and then like little mirrors to look in there and see. And your iPhone works really well for the camera on it to take pictures. And yeah, very fun.
What about bird baths? How often should we clean those? If we don't have a water supply, like a river near us, how often should that be cleaned? And just, there's been horrible hot weather. So if you can kind of guide us on this to make sure we're not harming the birds.
Yeah, I would say, giving them fresh water daily is good because, they're using them to wash themselves and to drink. And so that's a really good thing. I also really love cup plants. Cup plants, actually, the stems or the leaves wrap around the stems and they make these little cups. And then when it rains, the water gets held in that cup. And that's another really good source of water for both insects and birds. So planting cup plants can actually like create a water source on your farm as well. But yeah.
Hey, Noreen, the woman
Yes.
named Emily just put in a question. Did you talk about grouping nest boxes? For bluebirds, we always place 2 to 3. The undesired birds would nest in one and defend their territory from others, leaving the other nest box for bluebirds. Is that a strategy?
That's definitely a strategy. Bluebirds like their nest boxes typically like 300 feet away from each other, but you can put 2 within, 25 feet of each other. And do that. I've seen that strategy work as well. The tree swallows are not nearly as picky. They're like 35 feet away. So that can also, make it, you can put them closer together. If you have them too close together, oftentimes they'll only use one. So you want to make sure that you don't have like, 3 or 4 that are all like 20 feet apart. Because that I visited a farm earlier this spring that had that, and it was like, okay, you guys need to move them farther apart because they're just, they're using one, and there's 3 that are sitting there empty because they're too close to the others.
So Burke had posted too that you can purchase the songbird box or download the raptors box plan so you could give it to the Boy Scouts. Maybe it's right on your website. Courtney, is that something?
Yeah, we're not doing too much of the selling of nest boxes, but we do have the plans up on the website for the nest boxes.
And that's what I gave to the shop class too, was I just was like, here are the instructions. They're right here. Just do what they say.
Yep.
Alex had a question too. Are you doing data points of pre-nest box populations and then doing post box populations, or is it anecdotal?
We're trying to collect a little bit of data, but the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, like they have a program called Nest Watch, which people can also like log if you want to really get into it and nerd out on all the citizen science opportunities to like track data. They collect all that data, those data points. And so that's a good place. There are also like, the different states have like we have like the Minnesota Bluebird Recovery Association here in Minnesota, and they also track a lot of that data. So there's a bunch of different places to collect that data. We do have, we do send follow-up emails to people who are on our farmland flyway trail to try to, just to get basic info of, what species are you seeing the nest box being used by? How many fledged, what was the success rate, that kind of information. But yeah.
And Alex just posted that too in the chat, the Nest Watch link too. And there's a question if we can send out the links to everyone, and we sure can. That would be great for everyone because it's a lot of information. Can you also talk about the Flyways program? What is that? What's in conjunction with that? And how does migration benefit a farmer?
Yeah, so the Flyways program, and maybe I'll just do that screen share again so you can see the map. So we have, if you go to our website, you can check out the the Farmland Flyways Trail. Yeah, so there's, it's basically a survey that you fill out. Hannah was one of the first people in the Midwest to fill it out and jump on there. Thank you, Hannah. But it's a pretty simple survey with just your contact information. You don't have to like hit the exact dot of you can put it in the nearby town. You can put it, in a general area. It doesn't have to be exact, but it is like geolocated, which is nice. And yeah, it's just a way for us to sort of share with others. I shared this with a group of women in sustainable agriculture at a gathering, and there were tons of women who are like super inspired and excited to be a part of this and to be, wanting to like show other farmers what's possible and just, inspiring others. And so that's a definite part of that. Migrating birds are definitely beneficial too. They're not around for quite as long. They're more moving through, but they still need lots of, the same resources that the birds that are here year round or the breeding birds are utilizing, or even the non-breeding birds. And so there's, this whole, that any habitat that we can provide those migratory birds are well, because they're usually flying down from way down south, way up north, and they're going to stop along our farms. We have the flyway of the Mississippi River going through our state, and so it's really important to, lots of birds are traveling along that as they go. One other exciting thing that I can just mention here quick is that Wild Farm Alliance has this conservation innovation grant where we are creating a tool that's not gonna be ready for a year or two, but we're working on it, where we're looking at what birds are in the area and what plants they need to create the habitat for those birds, and then also what pests they eat. So you'll be able to use the tool to assess the landscape and look at what features you have, what improvements you can make to your farm that will increase the habitat. You'll be able to put in like, okay, I'm concerned about these 5 pests, and then we'll say, okay, you need to add these plants to invite the birds that will actually eat those pests for you. So I've been doing a lot of research, looking up birds, figuring out the birds that should be on the list, figuring out the plants that should be on the list, and then correlating that to all the insect data, and it's really fun and exciting. So watch for that coming probably in a year or 2 or 3, but it's on the horizon.
What, barn swallows, and Shelley had posted some things in there too. Barn swallows make a mess. They do. They're very, very messy. So, what is their worth then? Should I just get rid of them?
Oh no, the barn swallows are so effective, like at pest control. There's actually a study, we talked to this researcher who talks about how they create this like landscape of fear, where the barn swallows, just having them present in the barnyard area will actually decrease the amount of flies that are even in the area, because it just scares them away.
Yeah, and I have them right above my patio door and right above our shop. But just knowing that they're also keeping the fly pressure down helps us to, deal with a little bit of mess that we do have.
Do they ever, do any of the birds, like sit on the back of the cows? Because we had a few cows and the birds would sit there and just kind of peck the flies off the animals. I mean, have you had that, Hannah?
Well, yeah, I do have the cowbirds. But Courtney, I don't know if you know anything more about cowbirds and the difference between like the tree swallows and the cowbirds.
Well, the tree swallows tend to be more of a I'm trying to remember what the name of they tend to be like aerial gleaners, where they're gonna like swoop down and that's when they eat, versus like the cowbirds are gonna sit on there and peck. So there's different mechanisms that the birds use for if they're eating the insects in flight or not. One of my favorite statistics about birds eating insects in flight is the hummingbirds that will eat the spotted winged Drosophila bugs that are in our berry patches. And so if you have a nectar feeder up, they're flying back and forth like 2,000 times a day to the nectar source. And every time they take one of those trips, they could be eating spotted winged Drosophila. So I think we need to put hummingbird feeders in our berry patches. And I'm working on trying to get some research drummed up about this in the Midwest, because there's a study in New York, in like Cornell data on it. But yeah.
That's fabulous. And we have lots of questions about the one that we all love, biting Asian beetles, and also ladybugs, because they are bothered by them. Can you give us a...
Yeah, and I know that there are lots of insects that eat, or lots of birds that eat beetles. I'm not sure specifically about the Asian ones, but they're definitely feeding somebody. Yeah, and the Japanese beetles, again, like something that I did at one point was putting the pheromone trap above the water in the chicken house, the chicken coop, so that they would hit the pheromone trap and drop into the water, and then the chickens would eat them some of the time. It's not all the time, but some of the time they would eat them. So I know that at least the chickens would eat the Asian, or the Japanese beetles. Yeah.
Is there any bird that is specific that would eat them?
Not that I know of. I have not come across that specific. It's more just like general beetles that the birds eat.
Okay.
But once we get this tool cooking, hopefully we'll be able to spit that out.
Noreen, I think that we're losing people because they have to drop off at this time. And I really think it's been a robust dialogue about birds and mosquitoes and whatnot. Unless there are any other pressing questions, I think we can say thank you to both of you and to the team for delivering a wonderful, wonderful insight into birds and nesting boxes. What do you think, Noreen? Are we good?
Yes, we're good. And
We're-
thanks to everyone. Share this recording with all your friends. And let's get Courtney to really help with changing the dots on her map and helping the environment. And Hannah's been a great example. Burke, a great host. So thank you all.